our work sessions, but if anyone would like to stick around for our business meeting at 5:30, we take general public comment at that time if you want to react to the things you've heard here. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah to introduce some of our guests and get us started.
Thanks, Commissioners. I'm just going to turn it over to Pam Weegan, and she's going to kick off the presentation.
Good afternoon. This work session is an opportunity to share with the County Commissioners an overview of the specialty courts in Douglas County, including introductions to the teams, high-level overviews of participant outcomes, adherence to best practice. Thank you. And the impact of the courts on changing the lives of the participants and their families. Treatment in specialty courts began over 30 years ago as an intervention for individuals with substance use and mental health disorders who have justice system involvement. These interventions began in Douglas County initially with our behavioral health court launched in 2017, followed by the launch of our drug court in 2020. Specialty courts are considered part of the alternatives to incarceration programs offered through the partnerships with Douglas County Criminal Justice Services, Douglas County District Court, the Douglas County District Attorney's Office, service providers including Burt Nash, DECA, and other community partners. I'm going to turn it over to Judge Pokorny and Judge Simpson to introduce their team members. You can change slides.
Should I go first since I'm on the left-hand side? I'm Sally Pokorny, and I preside over the Behavioral Health Court. Whenever we have graduation, we'll have one tomorrow. I want you all to know that one of the first things I say is we couldn't have Behavioral Health Court without the generosity of our county commissioners, the understanding of Sarah Plinsky and all of the team that she works with, that this is can be a life-changing court and is for the benefit of this community. And I hope to present some actual stories from what's happened with participants in Behavioral Health Court. Behavioral Health Court also would not exist without the support of our district attorney, Suzanne Valdez. She has hired a dedicated assistant for Behavioral Health Court and Drug Court, and Jim Carpenter is there on the front row. He works closely with Katrina Hayes, who is our trial assistant for Behavioral Health Court and Drug Court. She's also a pretrial, works in the Criminal Justice Division and does pretrial supervision. We also have Jolene Cullen, who has come for this meeting. She is, I call her our voice of reason in Behavioral Health Court. All of us are bleeding hearts, and Jolene is like, but isn't that in the rules? So, and it's absolutely necessary to have Jolene and make sure that we are following the best practices. We have Sharon Zare and Michaela Derner are from Burt Nash. Sharon does our initial assessments for persons who apply to Behavioral Health Court. She makes those, the two tie-ins that are necessary in order to have an admission to Behavioral Health Court, which is, first of all, that you do have a severe mental illness or severe and persistent mental illness. And then in looking at the police reports, talking to Mr. Carpenter, and then talking to the applicant, is there a nexus between that mental illness and the crime that was committed? We have a number of people who do apply who are mentally ill, but there's simply no nexus between that mental illness and the crime, so that would make them not eligible. We fortunately have, in Behavioral Health Court, also have DECA working with us. Blair Braciano is the dedicated clinician. The reason that's so important that we have that substance abuse piece is that so many people who suffer from mental illness start self-medicating early on in that, either their psychosis or just mental illness, then have an addiction issue that arises. And so it becomes a real chicken and egg issue as far as having to treat not only the mental illness, but also the addiction, because unless they're both dealt with, neither one will get resolved. And then finally, but not unimportant are the 3 defense attorneys who work with the participants. We have Brenda Clary here today, who's actually going to speak on behalf of one of her clients who was a very successful graduate from Behavioral Health Court. We also have Kenzie Singleton and Karen Ebmeyer, who are very much a part of the team, making recommendations on treatment, other alternatives, and they work very closely with their clients to help them get through those requirements for behavioral health court, which are numerous and many are difficult for the participants.
All right, well, I'm Judge Simpson. I have the honor of presiding over the drug court, and I want to echo what Judge Pokorny said about how appreciative we are for the support that the county provides, so from the commissioners and from county staff and from the community, we recognize that we're able to have a very successful, unique program that has the resources it needs because of that support. And so I want to thank you for that. Our team has a lot of the same roles as the behavioral health court team with some slight differences based on the different population that we work with. But the first person I want to mention is Shannon Brugge, who's an adult services officer. She is here. And she's been with drug court since the beginning of drug court, and I think was with behavioral health court when it started too. And Shannon also has a lot of experience from drug courts in Missouri before she was here. So does an outstanding job, and her role is to provide the supervision of participants. So that's what she does, and she's a great part of the team. Then we have, next I'll talk about our therapists, and we're a treatment court. So obviously they are a key part of what we do. Andrea Ott, Andrea is here. She's the behavioral health clinical manager at DECA. And she's also been with drug court since it started, and I think was with behavioral health court when it started. So there's a lot of overlap here. But she's a licensed clinical professional counselor and a licensed clinical addictions counselor. And she provides direct services to all of our participants in group settings and also individual therapeutic settings. And then we have Emily, is it Trube or Truby? Trube, I just call her Emily. She's a therapist at DECA. I don't think Emily is here. She's probably in a group right now. But she's a licensed master's addiction counselor with DECA and a registered drama therapist. And she also provides direct services to our participants in group therapy and individual therapy. Then we have Senior Assistant District Attorney James Carpenter. He's here, and he's a very important part of the team. It's nice that he's involved with both behavioral health court and drug court because there's some, it's helpful to know what's going on there. And often we have folks who it's unclear, is it primarily a mental health issue or is it primarily a drug issue? And so that communication is important. And Mr. Carpenter also has a lot of experience in family law and mental health legal related issues, and so is a really important part of the team. In drug court, we have one defense attorney who represents all the participants. That's Dakota Loomis, who's a local attorney. He specializes in criminal defense. And he's an important part of the team as well. He's good at sort of taking a holistic view of our participants' legal problems and helping get that worked out. So that's important for the team. Katrina Hayes is an adult services officer. She does administrative duties with drug court. She's also on the behavioral health court team. So again, we have that connection that's very helpful. And she used to work for the sheriff's department, and so has a lot of good institutional knowledge about criminal justice and everybody involved here locally. Then we have Shelby Osborne, and she's with the reentry. She's with reentry for the sheriff's department, and that's a really key piece because she often has a lot to contribute in terms of finding housing and finding some of those logistical things for folks coming out of jail. and then also once they're out. She's really good about getting people hooked up with housing, navigating sometimes the frequent health issues that our folks are encountering. So she's also a very important part of the team. And then we have Gwen Fogarty, who is here. She's a sergeant with the Lawrence Police Department. And that is really helpful for drug court to have a connection to law enforcement because she knows what's going on out there in our community. And also is just a really good, thoughtful contributor to the drug court team. So overall, I'm constantly amazed by the dedication of our team. Every single person on there cares deeply about it, and it really shows. And I think our participants know how much everyone working with them cares. And in this context, that really does make a big difference. So it's a great team, and I'm glad so many of them were able to be here today, and happy to introduce them to you all.
And I did want to jump in. I forgot my reentry person, Rebecca Suja. I don't know why we didn't have somebody from reentry at the very beginning of behavioral health court. She has been exceedingly helpful in doing exactly what Judge Simpson has pointed out, having resources concerning, housing primarily, but she just is aware of many, many programs in the community that can help our participants and works on getting them connected. She also has like an inside pipeline to every Oxford house, which has been incredible also for behavioral health court.
Thank you. We're going to next have Dr. Matt Cravens go over the high-level data.
Thank you, Pam. So these are some very high-level stats on the two specialty courts. These are just derived from the reports that we do for the courts, which cover topics from recidivism to drug test analysis to housing. So this first one here just shows referrals to BHC and drug court. The number of referrals is trending slightly upwards, as you might be able to tell. Referrals to BHC are about 33% higher in the last 3 years than the first 4 years of the program. The number of referrals to drug court is about twice as high last year as it was in the first year of the program. BHC had an average of about 20 more referrals per year than drug court for the last few years, so it's a little bit, it gets a few more referrals each year. The next slide just shows acceptances to the programs, and this is trended slightly upwards in both programs as well. And then our last slide shows the number of exits from the program by year. So the successful graduation rate, as it shows on the bottom, is 53% for each court, and that goes until the end of 2023. And this successful rate is in line about with national mental health courts and drug courts. For BHC, the graduation rate is about the same in the last 3 years of the program as it was for the first 4 years. It was a little higher in 2020. The figure also shows that BHC is the larger program in terms of raw graduates. BHC has about twice as many graduates as drug court in the last 2 years, but drug court is growing, as you can see. And then the last stat I just want to point out is the average time for participants who successfully graduate is 14 months in BHC and 15.6 months in drug court.
Dr. Cravens, can I ask a question? This is Commissioner Kelly. So I'm just toggling back and forth, and in the behavioral health court, maybe I'm missing something, but it looks like sometimes we have the number of acceptances, and then when we go to the slide that shows success, is there a number on here that's not included?
Right, the people who are currently in the program wouldn't be
Okay.
included. And because the length of the time in the program is pretty long, about 15 months, 14 months, there is a big lag there. So you currently have a number of people in the program who are in the acceptances slide, but wouldn't be in this slide.
Got it. Thanks.
And that time frame, that 14 months, is it the same for behavioral health and for drug court, or are they different?
I think the judges could answer that best, but it's different. The different programs are different lengths of time.
It's about a month and a half difference. Drug court takes about a month and a half longer. Next, I want to talk about treatment courts are supported at the national level by research of All Rise, formerly known as the National Association of Drug Court Professionals, which provides resources and training and research to jurisdictions who operate various models of specialty courts. As treatment courts become commonly used and research models for intervention across the country, All Rise developed and continues to update the Adult Treatment Court Best Practice Standards, which outlines the best practices for the day-to-day operations of specialty courts. Our local specialty courts were developed using these standards, and throughout the year, each team spends time reviewing their processes and operations against the national standards. I'm going to let Judge Simpson and Judge Pokorny talk about their efforts for best practice.
All right, well, our program, when it was started by Judge Huff. She based it on the adult best practice standards for drug courts, for adult treatment courts. And those standards are published by a group called All Rise, which is formerly the National Association of Drug Court Professionals. And those drug court standards are based on, or those best practice standards are based on tons of research and analysis. And so the court has always been structured around those standards, and that's what we rely on going forward. We do that for a couple of reasons. One is that we know that the best practice standards are the evidence on how to run a drug court successfully. And we don't take for granted the amount of support from the county and the importance of the program for the community. And so we want to do a good job. And so we try very closely to adhere to the best practice standards in how we do things. Also, we're required to. There's a Supreme Court rule that covers treatment courts. It's Rule 192, and it says that a specialty court that targets drug offenders should substantially comply with the adult drug court best practice standards. So it's part of what we do because we think it's important and know it's the way to be most successful, and we're also required to do it by the Kansas Supreme Court. So that's why it's something that we pay very close attention to. We do a yearly, at minimum, a yearly review of our program and our policies and procedures in light of the data that we collect and that Dr. Cravens analyzes, and in light of the best practice standards that come out. There's a second edition of half of the best practice standards that came out in December of 2023. Not any huge changes really, more about how to implement the existing best practice standards. But we go through and we review our program, like I said, at least yearly in light of those standards. And I think that the two areas that come to mind where the best practice standards have had a big impact on how we do the drug court. One is that the standards say that you should not exclude folks who are on medication-assisted treatment, things like methadone or Suboxone. And so we have taken that on, and there's some difficulties that come along with having folks in your program who are prescribed Suboxone or methadone. But we accept them into the program because that's a best practice and it's important to do that. So that definitely informed our thinking and our approach to that aspect of some of our participants. The other area where I think the best practice standards have had an impact on how we operate is that we, in accepting people into the program, we try to stick very closely to the objective criteria that are the standards for the program. So are you high risk, high need, and there's not any of the couple things that can exclude you? We try to really make decisions about who gets into the program based on those objective standards, which is consistent with the best practice standards, as opposed to kind of subjectively trying to figure out who we want in the program. Because that's a way that historically folks have been excluded that shouldn't be excluded. So those are kind of the two things that come to mind for me in how we've most recently, those reviews of the best practices have impacted how we operate drug court.
Behavioral health court is also under the auspices of the Supreme Court rule, and we have to make sure we are in compliance with that. One of the things that we do in drug court is set aside an hour every month to review our handbook, or we will review participants that we are trying to analyze why did they fail or did not succeed, or why did somebody else take 20 months instead of 14 months, just to reinforce maybe better practices for us in helping people to succeed. As Judge Simpson said, we do try and stick with that criteria as far as, has to be a severe mental illness, severe persistent mental illness, and a relationship are tied into the offense. And we also do the RANT, and most of the people who are admitted into behavioral health court are the high-risk, high-needs persons, which is the people that we should be working with, as opposed to low needs, low risk. I think there are other programs that are less expensive, and also that a low risk, low needs person, although they may meet the other two criteria, could successfully complete on a diversion or an enhanced diversion, and really don't need all the services that behavioral health court would provide. The other thing the county is doing that is good, what's wonderful, is last year Judge Simpson went to the All Rise Conference with Mr. Carpenter. This year I am also going. Another opportunity to sharpen our, to the tools in our toolbox for best practices and how to go forward with behavioral health court. So that's what we do, and like I said, once a month work on that. And we work closely with Dr. Cravens. It's it's not the overall statistic that you gave here, but really drilling down on who's in behavioral health court, what services they were given, how frequently were those services accessed, how many, we look at the, gender distribution, racial distribution, are always working on that. And then also working as far as best practices. I think generally across the board, it is impressed upon the team that emphasis of your successes garners more success and helps the participants much more than the stick approach of lots of sanctions. So we do focus in behavioral health court, and I'm sure that they do in drug court also, on rewarding good behavior and rewarding good outcomes. And, even when somebody's had a bad week, month, whatever, we still try and come up with something positive to talk to them about, and then go on to, and then let's see what we can do to address these other things that have gone wrong. So.
Thank you. Next
Can
slide.
I ask a question? Here, Karen, Commissioner Willie. So Judge, you alluded to this a little bit, but if you could dive a little deeper, the difference between who gets referred and who gets accepted in both programs. It looks like it's about between a third and a half that are accepted. Those folks that are not accepted into those programs, I assume we would have heard of it if that was based on funding. I assume it's based on suitability. Can you talk about what makes someone suitable for this program and who is falling outside of that?
Yes, I'd be glad to address that. Actually, after the assessment, oftentimes we find, one, they're not a resident of Douglas County. So they may have applied, but that's a criteria that they don't meet. Also, we'll find out after the assessment that a participant, one, denies that they were ever involved in the offense. And our experience has been, because this is a very difficult process for most of the participants, that, 30 days in, 60 days, they are not happy with us because they keep saying, but I didn't even do anything wrong. Why are you making me do all these things? So that's an exclusionary criteria right there. Another one is when even though we have accepted people who deny that they are mentally ill, and it's hard to treat anything, whether, it's a broken arm, if you won't wear the cast because I don't have a broken arm. It's the same thing as when somebody will not acknowledge that they do have a mental illness that needs to be treated in some form or fashion. They just are not generally successful candidates. And others have made it clear they really aren't interested. Their attorney just said this might be a good idea for them to apply. I would say most of the reasons for denial are truly the lack of interest on the part of the person who has applied, or their expression of the fact that they don't really think they need this and don't know why we would think it was a good idea for them. So.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Judge, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I was just going to add that part of what Dr. Cravens, the data that he looked at, is the reasons for denial. And what it often comes down to, at least the denials by the drug court team, are that they're not meeting some criteria for the program. So the number one denial reason by the drug court team is that folks have unresolved cases in other jurisdictions. So an example would be, you have a hold from KDOC in a different case. Well, you're not going to come into drug court if you're going to go to prison from a different county. That's one example. I see the next highest one is not a Douglas County resident. Well, that's, so we've tried really hard to make sure that our denials are not based on anything sort of subjective. And what they ultimately come down to is likely someone, or for instance, with drug court, you're not charged with a felony. Well, we only take felonies. So often the denials reflect that there's some aspect of the criteria that are part of the program that someone just doesn't have.
Thank you for that. That leads me to other questions, but I think I might save them for later. I just had a quick question about the All Rise slide specific to the monitoring and evaluation. Judge Simpson, you talked about at least an annual review. Judge McCorney, you talked about having a real regular practice of sort of monthly review or focus on certain standards. There's a note in here about a skilled and independent evaluator examining it specific to drug court, but I might assume that the same standard is applied to behavioral health court. Every 5 years. Drug court hasn't quite existed for 5 years yet. I'm curious with behavioral health court if there's been a third-party independent evaluation through All Rise in addition to the internal local evaluation.
Ahead of us.
Oh,
We're going
okay.
to talk about, that's our next steps, is to get.
You go right ahead, Pam.
You're just jumping ahead, and we did put it up first, so sorry about that. Standard 10 in the All Rise best practice standards is, one, we already know we get our annual review from Dr. Cravens, and what they recommend is an independent evaluation by a neutral third party. The independent evaluations are recommending the standards to be completed every 5 years. We know that BHC is 1 year past 5. Drug court will be 5 years next year. So we felt like this is a good time to at least start that process. So we've reached out to All Rise, and I'm going to let Katie talk about what we've learned.
Thank you, Pam. Katie Fitzgerald, Criminal Justice Coordinator. In talking with, I reached out to All Rise about whether or not they potentially complete evaluations like this for jurisdictions. They do not themselves, but they work with a lot of evaluators and have a lot of recommendations that they put me in touch with. So I've talked with some folks about generally what does this process look like? What are the types of evaluations that are generally performed? What is the scope of that work for jurisdictions in this standard? So on this slide, the two primary evaluations, one is process evaluation. The purpose of these evaluations generally are to assess the extent to which our programs are operating and following the standards which Judge Pokorny and Judge Simpson have talked about. The process for the process evaluation usually will include court observations by the research team, interviews with all of the team participants, program participants and graduates if they're available, reviews of data and documents by the policies and procedures handbook, very similar to the process that the CJCC just went through with JMI. The deliverables from this for each of the courts would be a summary of outlining where and based on kind of demonstrating these are the standards where you're doing really well and here's what that looks like. And then here are the opportunities for improvement and recommendations that would come from that. The process evaluation is generally shorter. It could begin with existing resources later this summer and potentially is completed within 6 months. While All Rise does not itself necessarily do evaluations, what they do have the opportunity to do is provide additional technical support to implement recommendations that come from evaluations. And so the report that that each of the courts would receive based on the process evaluation we could then go back to All Rise and pursue, if necessary, additional technical assistance to support the courts if they were interested and needed that. The other evaluation that's the meatier part of this is an outcome evaluation. The purpose of this evaluation generally is to determine whether programs have delivered intended services and have had the intended impact on participants. This is a much more in-depth statistical evaluation. It requires a lot more data gathering, and our recommendation would be if we pursued this to begin this in fiscal year 25 due to the cost and the time that's involved in this. Kind of staggering them this way gives our courts, our court programs, the process evaluation to kind of begin more immediately, some tangible, whatever recommendations may come from that, while also then preparing for having the evaluation team come in FY25.
Katie, can I ask, what are the costs associated with those evaluations?
So one estimate that I have for the process evaluation, I will say there are significant efficiencies and cost savings to have both courts go through the evaluation process at the same time. So they receive their own separate, they go through the process together as a team, but they're doing it at the same time with the evaluation. The estimate for the process evaluation, I believe, is around 61,000 for total for both courts, so not a piece. And the outcome evaluation is a little harder to estimate because a lot of that depends on the evaluation, what the evaluation team, the extent to which any sort of data cleaning, the kind of quality of the raw data sets, and how much, there's a lot of variable costs there for their potential time. You will see a supplemental request in the Criminal Justice Coordinator budget for FY25 for this. I submitted it for 150,000, which is on the high end of what potentially that could cost. There's a lot of variables in that one.
And this is a 5-year process ideally. Have we been through this process with Behavioral Health Court?
We have
Not at all.
So this would be the very first time. Process evaluations, I don't think generally the outcome evaluation is one that's the one that every 5 years, or when there's significant changes in a program, which we haven't necessarily had that, but we have not had either of the courts, I don't think, have gone through this extensive of an evaluation yet.
Katie, can you give just a few more details about how many people does that involve? How long are they here? Or would it be better to talk about that maybe at budget? I mean, sounds like a
Like
lot.
through the
to me.
evaluation process.
Yeah,
If I can have time to get more of that
That'd be great,
information, to
yeah.
have a more informed conversation about that during budget. If those are the types of questions
Yeah.
that you all would be interested in around that, I will be prepared for that.
great.
It does not necessarily involve a lot of site visits from the team. There's a lot of this that would be done virtually with the teams. A lot of, our courts very quickly were able to switch and transition into doing a lot of things virtually with COVID. And so a lot of the evaluation part of that and working with the court teams throughout the components would be done virtually, not necessarily site visits, unless we specifically wanted that, felt the need for that. But
Is there a compliance portion, or like, if we did not fund a study or fund the evaluation in fiscal year 2025 and it pushed it for a year, is that something that puts us out of compliance in any way?
I don't know that I would say that there's a hard nosed kind of compliance
Just a
to
best
that.
practice?
It's best practice, and it's just good timing right now. We're not so far out on the behavioral health court kind of 5-year mark, and kind of just as we're coming into that with drug court, it was just a good timing. But
Maybe what I'd add to this while that team's thinking of it, I think it's less about compliance, but I mean, these are programs the county commission funds. If they're not working efficiently and effectively, we're wasting more resources.
100,000 is a hard way to find out if we're wasting resources, but I recognize it as part of the process there. So just trying to kind of balance and weigh, but we'll probably have more questions at budget time too.
I mean, this is a little bit of a sidebar, but I just don't want to lose track of it, especially before we go on to the next slides, which I think is a shift in gears. Judge Simpson, you were referencing some of the data that Dr. Cravens has specifically about the denials or non-acceptance. And also it sounds like some data, more granular data has been developed around understanding failures or withdrawals. I'd be interested in seeing more of that data. So I'm not sure exactly what format that lives in. And I know it's developed for the specialty court teams, but I'd be interested in seeing some of that breakdown beyond today to get a better sense of kind of how you're categorizing both the denials for acceptance and then these, you've got on the one chart, administrative closure, which is only representative of one on one chart. And then transfer, I'd be interested to understand that a little bit more, also not largely represented. But then if there's more sort of nuance to that voluntary withdrawal or failure termination, like any reasons or sort of categories that have been developed around that, that would be, I'm not asking you to summarize it for me today here, but I'd like to dig into that a little bit more and get a picture of how the sort of how you're seeing those patterns, if you're seeing patterns develop around that, and if it helps identify. Part of it is thinking just from a pure logistical and administrative level when you describe sort of the number of referrals you're getting that are being processed in some way, somehow by some people. And Judge McCorney, I think it was you who mentioned that, you were talking about how some folks don't necessarily aren't acknowledging that there is an issue to treat, or that it has relationship to the crime that they're being charged with, right, or any responsibility in that, but they were just referred by their attorney, right? So trying to unpack that a little bit and understand if there are opportunities to, I don't know, it's a hard balance to strike because I don't want to deter people from referring folks. But also I have to imagine that there's some administrative burden to really screening and processing those referrals and trying to determine through the criteria who's a good fit. So those are, I don't know if that's helpful. explanation of the question for why I want to kind of understand that more, but that's what I'm thinking about.
We do, just the specialty courts talk to the bar for their continuing legal education hours and for, in other ways, to try and explain what we're looking for in a potentially successful candidate for both of these courts. So we think that's more an educational process, but we're not trying to get attorneys to screen people out. We would rather that they, send them to us. And there have been more than one occasion when somebody has been screened by Sharon Zaire and she points out an issue or a problem. Well, we had one person who didn't live in Douglas County, and this person was so desperate to get into behavioral health court, she says, I'm moving. I used to live in Douglas County, and the fact I'm in Topeka is, another whole drama story thing, but I can get back to Douglas County. And so that would not have been, and she's doing fabulously. So that would not have been a good outcome to have had her attorney screen her out by saying, hey, the address you gave me is Topeka. I'm not even gonna bother to try and apply for you. So
I appreciate that anecdote, Judge. I really do. I think that's an important point to make, and I agree with you. I do think that that's the right approach, to cast a little bit of a wider net. But I'm also still interested to kind of understand if there's just other entry point issues, I suppose, that are easy to articulate and understand, and if there's opportunity to remove barriers or rethink about some of that criteria in the future.
I think the other balance you have to strike is making sure that you really are sticking with high risk, high need folks. And so it's a balance. The one thing I was going to add just really quickly, I get your point. It's very well taken about terminations and kind of digging into that a little deeper. So both these programs are voluntary. So the participants can say, I don't want to do this anymore, and then they leave the program. That's what a voluntary withdrawal is. So when you look at it, I think the data is that 31% of participants are terminated from the program, which is where the court says you're terminated. So I think that puts in perspective that we try really hard not to say we're done with you as a participant in these programs. And so that I think kind of helps put it in perspective a little bit about what's going on there, that most people in these programs are not terminated from the programs. Most of them graduate, but even those that don't are the ones who chose to remove themselves from the program.
And I'll just add, Commissioner, to build on what Judge Simpson was saying. We do track recidivism outcomes for all these groups. So on the failures or terminations and the withdrawals and all these people, I merge on about 6 years of Douglas County jail data going back 2017 for all these groups, including for referrals and people who are denied. And so to answer your question about what format this is, I think we have about 110, 120 slides for both the courts on all these topics that we're happy to give you that'll probably answer most of these questions. So yeah, I just to give you a quick preview, I can say that the recidivism outcomes are very good for the successful graduates. They have very low recidivism in the years following the program compared to the years before the program. So they are saving the county some money.
And that was what I was going to ask next. And if you'd like to send those slides, I think we would be glad to have them, and Sarah can put them in our packet for future. But yeah, that was my question of, we have a number of successful graduates. What does that long-term success look like? And getting a picture for that. So if you have any stories or anecdotes to go with that, and then we can also get those slides when you have them.
Yeah, we'll need to do a little bit of cleanup since we have some client information on there that needs to be removed, but definitely that'll be forwarded to you. I wanted to give an opportunity to Judge Simpson and Judge McCorney have asked program graduates and family members to share with the Board of County Commissioners the impact that the specialty courts have had on their lives. So
I have Faith Anderson is here, and Faith, why don't you take my seat? Chair's over here. Oh, okay, or next to
just move.
Judge
Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm really nervous. My name is Faith Anderson, and first I want to tell Judge Picorni I'm honored for her to ask me to come here and speak to you guys, and I want to thank you guys for having the Behavioral Health Court and the Drug Court. My son was involved in the Behavioral Health Court, so I'm partial to that one. So my story, I guess I'll start with that. In 2021, in February, I don't know if you read the headline about the man who drove a woman into the lake. That was me and my son. And that was part of his mental health issues and the struggles that he had been having for several months before that. My son had never been in trouble with the courts. And he ended up being arrested and was incarcerated and was ordered to go to Larned. And he waited through all of that, finally went to Larned and came back. And I had been talking with the DA, begging her to figure out something to not put my son. My son was facing, I think, 15 years in prison, and his charge was second-degree attempted murder. I think that's what it was. And so luckily, with the approval of everyone involved in the Behavioral Health Court and the referral from the DA, my son was accepted into the Behavioral Health Court program. And he successfully completed that in, I think it was 13 months, I think. And he was accepted in December of 2022, and he graduated February, the day after Valentine's Day, from the program. And he's grateful. He's at work today, or he probably would have been here as well. And I just want to say thank you for letting this program be here. And if I could say anything that would I kind of lost my train of thought. If there's anything that I could say that would keep that here, if it was ever to go away, I don't know if it would. I know Douglas County is the only one of the 2 counties in Kansas that has this program, and I think that's special. And I don't want to ever see it go away. I think more counties should have this program. And I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you, we really appreciate it.
Okay.
I'd also point out that her son started college at Johnson County Community College. How far has he gone since? He was doing that while he was in Behavioral Health Court, in addition to having a part-time job. Right. Yeah, but he's a success. Yes. And his mother was with him at every court appearance.
Everyone, until he started going to Johnson County, and then he did Zoom.
That's true. He did Zoom in for a while. Thank you so much for coming. And I have one more. Brenda Clary is here, and Brenda was serendipitously contacted by a former client of hers who was in Behavioral Health Court, who wrote her a very moving email about how grateful she was for that program. So go ahead, Brenda.
I'm primarily here to read the statement. However, I have to say, this young woman is special to me because she introduced me to Behavioral Health Court. I was appointed to represent her before I was involved, and I thought, she might be a good fit. So she and I went to a Behavioral Health Court docket. It happened also to be a graduation. And to this day, that's probably the best graduation I've ever seen. I applied for the next opening. Judge Picorni was kind enough, despite my apparent lack of qualifications, to accept my enthusiasm as enough to put me on the defense panel. And Jennifer Potter was my first client into behavioral health court and my first that I had all the way through. And she graduated, I should have looked up the date. It's been a couple of years ago. And she, I'm sorry? Well, she came in about 5 years ago. She was in for quite a bit, yeah, less than 2 years. So it's been a good 3 years. So May 3rd, I get this text from her and she just spills all of this gratitude for the program. I asked if she could be here today. She's currently at Fort Hays State University, both employed and as a student. That was not possible, but she sent me this statement. When I was first arrested, I was barely 20. I had just flunked out of college. I was jumping between minimum wage jobs, had no car, and had even been evicted from my apartment. I had unchecked mental health issues and was in an incredibly toxic relationship that neither of us would end. Every single aspect of my life felt unstable, which created stress and anxiety that snowballed out of control with each passing day. Now, 5 years later, I have a long-term job as a senior administrative assistant at Fort Hays State University. On top of working full-time, I have re-enrolled in college to obtain a graphic design BFA with the hopes of an MFA after that. I will graduate debt-free due to the tuition assistance benefit I receive as a university employee, as well as the scholarships I've been awarded from faculty nominations and student honors exhibitions. I volunteer regularly and have found joy in my hobbies again. I am the happiest and healthiest I've ever been, both physically and mentally. I've discovered a level of stability I've never known before. Recently, I've been reflecting on how much life has changed in the last 5 years, and I've recognized that this growth would not have been possible without the Behavioral Health Court of Douglas County. While in Behavioral Health Court, I met an amazing team of people who showed me that I could be a much better version of myself if I put in some time and effort. While the expectations were strict, it was the kind of structure that I desperately needed. I had a support system that I would not have had otherwise. The BHC team held me accountable with therapy and medication management appointments, which was integral to my success. For the first time in my life, I was able to go to therapy consistently since I had no financial hurdle in the way. I was able to dissect how my upbringing in and out of foster care was affecting the ways in which I thought, processed emotions, and reacted to the things around me. Understanding was the first step to changing. It was so beneficial to my improvement that I continued therapy even after I was done with BHC. In addition to working on the underlying issues, the team pushed me to start considering my future. I had to make plans to improve my financial security, housing stability, and employment. They helped me break these seemingly impossible goals into smaller, achievable steps. Most importantly, the BHC team made me feel human. I wasn't another case number to get through as quickly as possible. They cared about me and wanted to hear what I had to say. To them, I wasn't worthless. I wasn't a lost cause. They saw potential where I didn't and put time and energy into fostering that potential until I could see it for myself and wanted to continue to grow on my own. Behavioral Health Court was a turning point in my life, and being in the program has continued to affect my life in positive ways, even long after leaving the program. I genuinely don't believe I would be where I am now without the program and the amazing team behind it.
Thank you for sharing that.
So we have two drug court graduates here today. One, I just want to recognize Hope. Hope, if you don't mind waving. Hope graduated in October of 2023, and Hope is an outstanding person in a lot of ways, and she does a ton of stuff in the community to give back. But one of the reasons we asked her to be here, and she was kind enough to do that, is that Hope is president of our alumni group, which is something we're really excited about, so that even when folks graduate from the program, they can remain connected and all those things. So Hope is the president of our alumni group. So please make sure you say hi to Hope and chat with her. Then we also have Tim. Tim is here. Tim, do you mind coming on up? Tim has agreed to speak with you. He graduated in April of 2024. Also an amazing person who's doing great things, and so I know you'll enjoy hearing from him.
Thank you, Tim, and good to see you again.
Hi. Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Shoulderblade. I am currently 32 years old and one of Drug Court's alumni. I graduated the program in April, on April 5th. And I'd like to start by saying thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my journey through the program with you and what an incredibly positive impact it's had on my life. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. I've used meth since I was 13 and alcohol since I was 9. Right now, I currently have 1 year, 7 months, and 19 days clean. This is by far the longest time I've ever had clean. I first came to Lawrence from Kansas City due to a homeless shelter in Kansas City being shut down, being that it was only a winter shelter. I came to Lawrence with the hopes of getting into the shelter here, but it was denied. Around that time, I was drinking about 4 to 5 half gallons of vodka a day and doing best to not get too drunk and drinking to not get too strung out, and it ended up catching some charges, which landed me in jail. I sat about 7 months in jail. I went to treatment during that time. After I was released, I went to Artists Helping the Homeless, where I was approached by the reentry team who suggested that I apply for the drug court program. After a few weeks, I was accepted and I had no idea what I was in for, but I was ready for a change. After meeting the team, when the judge accepted my plea and entered me into drug court, I immediately knew these people really wanted me to succeed and cared very much about their participants in their recovery. Upon entry into the drug court, I was advised of the resources that were available to me and how to go about utilizing those resources. The judge immediately helped me set goals, and the rest of the team helped me by laying out a roadmap, but always let me know that nobody's going to work harder on my recovery in my life than I am. I had a DUI in 2009 and thought my driver's license was out of reach for the longest time until the drug court attorney, Dakota Loomis, reached out to Oklahoma, set up a court appearance, and let me know what I needed to do to get my license back. Today, I have my driver's license and my first car that's actually in my name. And as I stated, I'm 32 years old. I'm a high school dropout. Judge and Shannon Brugge advised me of getting my education, how that would open so many doors for me. During the drug court time, I was able to get my GED, and it did just that for me. I now work for Artists Helping the Homeless, and I just finished my freshman year at Haskell studying social work with a 3.8 GPA. And I'm able to put to good use everything I've learned in drug court, which is such as self-accountability, time management. I will continue to support this vital program because it gives a chance to flourish, keeping in mind that everyone deserves a second chance and drug court can provide the tools necessary for success. Thank you.
And I believe, Tim, you've brought someone with you.
Yes, that's my wife, Anita.
Thank you for being here, too.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
And we're open for questions if you have any more.
My question is silly, but I just don't know why we don't applaud in our county commission meetings. I mean, thank you all for sharing your stories. That's so powerful, and thank you for being here today. I think so often what we work on here seems very policy-based, and it's really great to hear stories that we can understand how it's impacted members of our community, how members of our community are giving back through these programs. So just want to applaud that and thank you for that gift today to us. Thank you.
So I've gotten to attend at drug court a couple of times, and it really has been a powerful and amazing opportunity to be there. So thank you, Judge Simpson, for having me there. And I've not yet made it to Behavioral Health Court, but I imagine that is also just a really positive, reinforcing, very humanizing situation. And I really enjoyed being part of it. That's where I got to meet Tim the first time. So
Graduation tomorrow, 1:30.
Thank
My
you.
courtroom.
So I would echo, I very much appreciate people being willing to come forward and share their stories. That is an important piece for us, that otherwise we see data and numbers, but we don't always get to see the people. And it really does, these programs especially touch lives in ways that it's really great for us to get a chance to know what happened with that.
Yeah, now that I've composed myself, because that was moving and I really appreciate it. So thank you, Tim, for sharing your story and being so vulnerable, and for giving back to your community because of it. Thank you, Brenda, for being the kind of attorney that you are, who went and watched a whole docket with your client in order to get more information, and then walked through that process with her and still have a connection. And thank you for being here to share that story. And thank you, Faith, for being a mom who really loves her child and just wants healing. I'm really grateful that all of you came. I didn't compose myself very well, but that's okay. Crying's okay. And it is a gift. We don't get to hear those stories very often. We don't always get to see the direct impact that decisions that we make in these Wednesday night meetings, what they result in. So thank you for that.
Commissioners, are there any other questions? So thank you all for being here and for answering our questions. And we are recessed until our 5:30 business meeting. Thank you all.